remember the day my daughter called me, her voice shaking, barely able to get the words out. "Mom, I need you. I'm scared." Every mother's worst fear is that phone call, the one where you realize your child is in trouble and you're not there to protect them. But when I arrived at her apartment and she whispered through trembling lips, "You're the bait," everything changed. I looked around that room, and for a moment, I felt a cold rush of fear. But then I smiled, wiped the worry off my face, and said, "Good, let's make sure they bite." What happened next? You're not going to believe it. Let me back up a bit. My name is Lila Matthews, and I'm a 38-year-old high school teacher. I've spent most of my life making sure my daughter, Ella, had everything she needed to feel safe. I raised her on my own after her father left when she was just a baby. Ella's 20 now. She's smart, strong, and independent. Everything I wanted her to be. She's not the kind of person who asks for help unless she absolutely has to. That's part of the reason I knew something was wrong when she called me crying that night. I've always been there for her. I've taken care of her since day one. But no matter how hard you try, there are things you can't control. Ella lives on her own now, in a small apartment just a few miles away from me. She's been a bit distant lately, talking less about her life, especially about the people she's been hanging out with. I didn't push her though. I wanted to respect her space. She's growing up, but when she called that night, I knew that whatever was happening was big, and it was serious. I jumped in my car without even thinking. No questions, no hesitation. All I cared about was getting to her. The drive felt like an eternity. My mind raced. What could be going on? Was she hurt? Who could be hurting her? By the time I pulled up to her apartment building, my heart was pounding in my chest. Something in my gut told me that this wasn't just another one of her small problems. This was different. I ran up the stairs, barely even knocking before I burst through the door. And there she was, Ella, sitting on the floor, her hands trembling. Her face was pale, and her eyes were wide with fear. "Mom, they're here," she whispered, barely audible. I dropped my bag to the floor and knelt beside her. My instincts kicked in. "Who, Ella? What's going on?" She shook her head, trying to calm herself. They know about you." I felt a cold chill run down my spine. "Who knows about me? What does that mean?" And then she looked at me, her voice almost too soft to hear. "You're the bait." I froze. I couldn't make sense of what she meant. Why would she say that? Was she in danger? Was someone after her? But before I could ask more, I heard a sound outside someone was outside. Ella's face went, "Mom, they're here." Didn't know what was happening, but I wasn't about to leave her in danger. Not now. Not ever. I could feel the panic building up inside me as I stood there in Ella's apartment, my mind racing. She was trembling, her face pale, and I couldn't make sense of anything. What did she mean? "You're the bait." Who was after her? And why was I suddenly involved in something so terrifying? I looked around the room, searching for any sign of what was going on. The place was quiet, too quiet. The only sound was the faint hum of the fridge in the corner and the beating of my own heart in my ears. The walls felt like they were closing in. I felt the weight of Ella's fear pressing down on me, and my protective instincts flared up. My daughter had always been my priority, and I would do anything to keep her safe. But this was beyond anything I could have prepared for. "Mom, they've been watching me," Ella said, her voice barely a whisper. I could barely hear her over the rush of blood in my head. She was looking at the floor now, not making eye contact. Her hands were clutched tightly in her lap, and her breathing was shallow. She was clearly in shock, and I could tell that whatever had happened had taken a toll on her, both physically and emotionally. "Who, Ella? Who's been watching you?" I asked, trying to keep my voice calm. I needed to keep her calm. I needed to understand what we were dealing with. Ella took a deep breath and then slowly looked up at me, her eyes wide with fear. It started online. I met someone who seemed normal. We talked a lot, and then he started showing up in places I didn't expect. He followed me home. He knew where I worked, and then he started sending me these weird messages. My stomach churned. I had heard of people being stalked online before, but I had never imagined it would happen to my own daughter. I reached for her hands and gripped them tightly. "Why didn't you tell me sooner, Ella? Why didn't you let me help?" "I didn't want to worry you," she said, her voice shaking. I thought it would stop, but it didn't. It got worse. Suddenly, there was a loud thud from the hallway. My body went rigid. I didn't know what it was, but I knew it wasn't good. Ella's eyes locked onto mine, and for a moment, we just stared at each, both of us silently acknowledging that things had just escalated beyond our control. "We need to leave," I said, standing up quickly and pulling Ella with me. But she shook her head. "No, Mom, you don't get it. They're not here for me. They want you. They think you're the one who knows how to stop them." I blinked in confusion. "Stop them? Who are they?" "They're dangerous," she said, her voice barely audible now. "I'm not sure who they are, but I think they're part of something bigger, something dark." The rooms get smaller, the walls pressing in even harder. I looked toward the door again, my heart racing. I couldn't hear anything now, not a sound. But I knew they were out there, somewhere, waiting for the right moment to make their move. "We need to call the police," I said, reaching for my phone. But just as my hand brushed the screen, I froze. What if they were already watching us? What if the phone call was exactly what they were waiting for? The thought made my stomach turn. We couldn't take that risk. Ella's voice broke through my thoughts. "That's why I said you're the bait. They know that if they can get you to trust them, they'll have access to everything. They think you have answers. Answers you don't even know you have." I felt a wave of confusion wash over me. "Ella, I don't understand. What answers? I'm just your mom. I don't know anything about these people." She shook her head, her eyes wild with fear. "I don't know, Mom, but I think they've been watching you too. I think they know who you are, and they think you have something that could help them get what they want." I tried to push the panic down. I had to stay calm. Ella needed me to be strong right now. "We'll figure this out, but right now, we need to stay quiet and stay calm. We can't let them know we're onto them." I took a deep breath, trying to steady myself. My mind was racing, but my instincts were clear. We needed to get out of there. We needed a plan. But I also knew one thing for sure. I wasn't going to let anyone harm my daughter, no matter who they were or what they wanted. "Listen to me," I said, my voice steadying. "We're going to stay in here, out of sight, until I figure out what to do. And we're going to make sure they don't know we're on to them. Whatever they think they know about me, we're going to turn it on them." Ella nodded, though I could see the fear still lingering in her eye. We both knew that our next move would be crucial, and whatever was coming, we'd face it together. As the minutes ticked by, every creak of the floorboards outside sent a jolt through my body. I couldn't let myself panic. Not yet. We had to be smart. But every second that passed without hearing anything only made me more nervous. Were they waiting? Were they already inside, watching us from the shadows? All I knew for sure was that this was no longer just about protecting my daughter. It was about surviving whatever this was, and taking down whoever was behind it. The silence in Ella's apartment felt suffocating. Every tiny sound, from the faint hum of the refrigerator to the creaking of the old floorboards, seemed to echo in the stillness. My mind was spinning, trying to process everything Ella had just said, but there was no time to waste. The feeling of imminent danger was all too real now. The hair on the back of my neck stood on end as I realized just how close we were to something far worse than either of us had expected. Ella's words kept playing in my head. "You're the bait." What did she mean by that? Why would anyone want me involved? Was I really a target? But I couldn't afford to keep wondering about it. If I didn't act quickly, we could both be in even more danger. I scanned the apartment again, looking for anything that could help. The furniture, the shadows, the door, everything felt like a potential trap. Ella's trembling hands were still clenched tightly, her knuckles white. I had to calm her down, but more than that, I had to figure out a way to protect both of us from whatever was coming. "We need to move," I said, trying to sound as confident as I could. Ella looked at me, confusion still clouding her expression. She didn't understand what I was trying to do, but I couldn't explain it yet. I couldn't let her see how scared I really was. "Mom, no, we can't just run," Ella protested, her voice trembling. "They'll find us. They'll follow us." I could see the fear in her eyes, and I hated that she felt so powerless, but I had to make her see reason. "Listen to me, Ella," I said firmly, my voice cutting through her panic. "We're not running. We're going to turn the tables. We need to take control of this situation." She shook her head. "What do you mean?" I took a deep breath, trying to keep my own fear at bay. I don't know exactly who these people are or what they want, but I do know this. They've been watching you. They've been watching us, and they think they have the upper hand, but they're wrong. We're going to make sure they don't expect what's coming next. I saw a flicker of understanding in her. She was scared, but she trusted me. What do? We need to prepare, I said, moving toward the window. I peeked through the blinds, looking out into the darkening street below. My thoughts were racing. The way Ella had described them, dangerous, watching from the shadows, waiting for the right moment to strike. It made me realize something. We had to make them think we were vulnerable, that we didn't know what was going on. But in reality, I was already planning our next move. Mom, we don't have time, Ella said urgently, her voice barely above a whisper. I could see the fear creeping back into her face. They could be here any minute. I nodded. I knew time was running out, but I wasn't going to let fear take over. I turned toward her. We're going to make sure they think they've won. We'll act like we're giving in, like we don't know what's going on. But once we've got them in the right position, we'll trap them. They won't even know what hit them. Ella stared at me, her eyes wide, processing what I was saying. For a brief moment, I could see the doubt in her eyes, but then something shifted. She took a deep breath, her fear replaced by a hint of determination. She was starting to trust my plan. Okay, she said quietly, nodding. But how do we do that? I moved toward the door, locking it behind us as I spoke. First, we need to get everything ready. If they think we're hiding, we can use that against them. We'll make it look like we're trapped, like we don't have a way out. But then, once they're in, we'll be in control. You know where the pepper spray is, right? Ella nodded, her eyes still wide but focused. I've got it in my bag. Good. Keep it close. If they try to force their way in, use it. Don't hesitate. We're going to surprise them, Ella. That's our advantage. They won't expect us to fight back. I moved quickly, checking the locks on all the windows, making sure every door was secure. I couldn't let anyone get in undetected. I could hear the faint sounds of movement outside, but I couldn't be sure who was there. I had to stay sharp. As I turned back to Ella, I saw her trying to steady her breathing. I know you're scared, I said, walking toward her. I am too, but we don't have a choice. We have to be smart. We have to fight. Ella swallowed hard, her voice trembling slightly. But what if they have more people? What if we can't handle it? I looked her square in the eye, my voice steady and firm. We will handle it. We have each other, and we're not going down without a fight. I took a deep breath, trying to steady my nerves as well. The fear was still there, but I couldn't let it control me. Not now. Not when Ella was counting on. I had made my decision, and I wasn't going to back down. I'm not going to let anyone hurt you, I said, my voice low but fierce. Not on my watch. I turned back to the window and peeked through the blinds again. There, standing at the edge of the street, I saw a shadow move. I couldn't see who it was, but I could feel their presence. They were getting closer. Get ready, I whispered to Ella, my heart pounding in my chest. This is it. We're about to make our move. I could feel the weight of the moment. It wasn't just about protecting Ella anymore. It was about taking control. We weren't going to be victims. We were going to turn the tables, and we were going to make sure they wouldn't see us coming. The moment I'd been preparing for was finally here. I stood next to Ella, both of us holding our breath, trying to steady our nerves as we waited. The tension was unbearable. I could hear the faint sound of footsteps outside, slowly drawing closer. My pulse raced, every second feeling like an eternity. It was a game of nerves now, ours against theirs, and I wasn't about to let fear win. I glanced at Ella. She was still shaking, but her eyes were sharp, focused. I could see the trust in them. She was ready to follow my lead, no matter what came next. That thought kept me grounded. No matter how deep this mess went, we were in this together, and together, we would get through it. The footsteps stopped just outside the door. I held my breath. The silence was deafening. Then came the slow creak of the door handle turning. I barely moved. I couldn't afford to give away our position. The plan was simple. Make them think we were trapped. Let them come in, get comfortable, thinking they had control. And then we'd flip the script. Suddenly, the door burst open with a violent crash. I flinched, but held my ground. A tall man, dressed in dark clothes, stepped into the room, followed by another figure. The first man was wearing a mask, but there was something familiar about his posture. The way he moved with a certain confidence that suggested he'd done this before. The second man didn't look like much, but his eyes were cold, calculating. It didn't take a genius to know these were the people who had been stalking Ella. They were dangerous, and they had no idea what was waiting for them. "Where is she?" the masked man growled, looking past me toward Ella. His voice was low, full of menace. It sent a chill down my spine, but I didn't show it. I wasn't going to give them the satisfaction of seeing me flinch. I stepped forward, blocking their view of Ella. "You're looking at her," I said, my voice as calm as I could manage. I kept my tone steady, not wanting them to know how nervous I really was. The man took a step closer, sizing me up. I could feel his eyes on me, like he was deciding whether or not I was a threat. I didn't flinch. Not now. "You think you're in control, don't you?" he said, his voice dripping with arrogance. "You think you can stop this?" I stood my ground, my mind racing. I needed to stall, give Ella time to move into position. I could see she was slowly inching toward the back of the apartment, her hand inching toward her bag where the pepper spray was hidden. "I don't know what you want," I said, trying to buy more time. "But you're not going to get it by hurting my daughter," he sneered. "You don't even know what's at stake here, do you? We've been watching you for a long time. You're the key. You're the one who can stop all of this from going south." I had no idea what he meant by that, but I wasn't going to let him control the conversation. I'd made up my mind. I couldn't let him know I had no idea what they were talking about. I had to bluff my way through this, and I had to do it fast. Before I could respond, I heard a movement behind me. The second man, his face wasn't masked, but his expression was unreadable, was reaching into his coat. Something told me it wasn't good. That's when everything clicked. I had no choice but to act now. I swung around quickly, grabbing a nearby chair and flinging it toward the man in the back. He staggered back in surprise, giving me just the opening I needed. Ella had already grabbed her pepper spray and, with surprising speed, sprayed it right in the first man's face. He screamed, recoiling back, hands flying up to his face. It gave us the moment we needed. I rushed forward, grabbing a lamp from the side table, and swung it at the second man with everything I had. The impact sent him crashing to the ground, his head slamming against the floor with a sickening thud. For a moment, the room was still, the only sound the ragged breaths of both Ella and me. But we weren't done. Not yet. Ella rushed to my side, looking at the man who was still trying to recover from the spray. "Call the cops," she gasped. I nodded, my heart racing. I grabbed my phone from my pocket, dialing 911, trying to steady my hands. As I spoke with the dispatcher, I kept my eyes on the two men, praying they wouldn't get up again. "We've been attacked," I said into the phone, my voice trembling slightly. "Two men are in my apartment. They're dangerous. We need help now." The operator reassured me that help was on the way, but I didn't let my guard down. Ella stayed close by my side, her breath still quick but her focus clear. We both knew this wasn't over yet. The man I'd knocked out with the lamp was beginning to stir, groaning as he tried to push himself up. "You'll regret this," he muttered, his voice weak but laced with venom. I stood in front of Ella, ready for anything. "Not today," I said, my voice steely, stronger than I'd ever heard it before. The words felt foreign coming from my mouth, but they were true. I wasn't afraid anymore. I wasn't going to let anyone take Ella from me. The door suddenly burst open again. I flinched, but it was the police, rushing in with their guns drawn. Relief flooded through me as they quickly assessed the situation, arresting both men without a word. They were no longer a threat. Not to us. I collapsed against the wall, the adrenaline still pumping through my veins. Ella stepped up beside me, her eyes wide but filled with gratitude. "We did it," she whispered, the tension in her voice finally easing. I nodded, pulling her into a tight hug. "We did it. We're safe now." But in that moment, I knew this was more than just surviving the night. It was about finding strength I never knew I had, and using it to protect the one person who meant everything to me. Whatever came next, we would face it together, and I would never let anyone come close to taking her from me again. The sirens from the police cars slowly faded as they drove away, the flashing red and blue lights still illuminating the street in eerie waves. The apartment was quiet now, but it felt like the silence was pressing down on me, the kind that happens after a storm has passed, but leaves everything feeling unsettled. I sat on the couch, the weight of everything that had just happened sinking in. My hands were still shaking slightly, but I tried to steady them. I had to be strong for Ella. She was sitting beside me, her head leaning against my shoulder, her body still tense. I could feel the tremble in her muscles, the aftershock of everything that had just unfolded. I wanted to tell her that everything would be okay, that the danger had passed, but I wasn't sure if I believed it myself yet. The truth was, we'd both been through something that would change us forever. After the police left, Ella and I spent the rest of the night talking, piecing together what had happened. The two men who had broken into the apartment were part of something much bigger than we could have imagined. They'd been stalking Ella for months, watching her every move, waiting for the right time to make their move, and I had unknowingly walked right into their trap. It wasn't just about Ella anymore. It was about something darker, something we still didn't fully understand. But we were safe, and that was the only thing that mattered right now. As Ella spoke, I realized just how much she'd been carrying alone. For so long, she'd kept everything from me, trying to protect me in her own way. She hadn't wanted to drag me into her fear, hadn't wanted to worry me, and I couldn't help but feel a pang of guilt. Why hadn't I seen the signs? Why hadn't I pushed her to open up sooner? But that was the past, and I couldn't change it. What mattered now was that we had made it through. We had faced the danger together, and we had won. It wasn't just about the physical fight, though that was terrifying enough. It was about the way we came together in that moment, the way we trusted each other completely. That was the real victory, the kind that no one could take away from us. The next day, the reality of what we'd been through really started to hit me. I kept thinking about how close we'd come to losing everything. I kept replaying the scene over and over in my mind. The fear, the adrenaline, the way my heart had nearly stopped when I heard the door slam open. I knew we were lucky. Not everyone makes it out of situations like that. Some people never get the chance to fight back. But we had, and that was something I would carry with me for the rest of my life. As I looked at Ella, sitting across from me at the kitchen table, her face still a little pale, I realized just how much she had changed too. She wasn't the same girl who had been so eager to push me away a few months ago. The girl who thought she could handle everything on her own. She was still strong, still independent, but there was a new respect in her eyes. A respect for what we had survived, for the bond we shared. "I'm sorry, Mom," she said quietly, her voice softer than I'd ever heard it. "I should have told you. I shouldn't have kept it all from you." I shook my head, reaching across the table to take her hand. "Ella, you were trying to protect me. I get that, but you don't have to carry this alone anymore. I'm here, always. I'll be here no matter what." She nodded, a tear slipping down her cheek. It was the first time I'd seen her cry since everything had happened, and it broke my heart. But at the same time, I knew that this moment of vulnerability was something we both needed. She needed to know that she wasn't alone, and I needed to let go of the guilt that had been eating at me. We were in this together, and nothing was going to change that. The police had told us that the two men were part of a larger criminal organization, one that specialized in stalking and manipulating people online. They were using social media to target vulnerable individuals, then blackmailing them into doing their bidding. Thankfully, with the evidence we had, they'd been able to make arrests. The immediate danger was gone, but there were still questions. Questions about who else might be involved, who else was watching, and if they would come after us again. But for now, all we could do was focus on what we could control, each other. A few days later, I sat down with Ella to talk about what had happened. We both agreed that we would be more open with each other from now on, no more secrets. It wasn't just about protecting each other from external threats. It was about being there for each other emotionally too. No matter how hard things got, no matter how much she tried to protect me by keeping things to herself, we would face everything together. No more hiding, no more pretending that we could handle it alone. As I looked at her, I realized something important. This whole experience had changed us, yes, but it had also strengthened us. It had shown us what we were capable of when we came together, when we didn't let fear or shame dictate our actions. We had learned to fight back, to protect what mattered most. And most importantly, We had learned that our bond was unbreakable. I hugged her tightly, the weight of the world still lingering on my shoulders, but somehow lighter now. We had made it through the storm, and together we would face whatever came next, because we were stronger than we'd ever known, stronger together. And that was the most important lesson of all.